next year by the European Commission, Parliament, and Council, and what the path forward there is, and what other regions and cities can learn from that. Welcome, come on in, find a seat. So, Christian, over to you.
Yes, thanks, Jill. This is working. Yep. With great pleasure. Good afternoon to everyone after lunch. And many thanks to the organizers for having invited the European Union to this timely event. Maybe the first word to say is to those of you who may not be following the workings of the European Union on a daily basis. The European Union is not a federal entity. The European Union is an organization of independent sovereign states, member states of the EU. And in that constellation, there are some policy areas such as trade policy, competition policy, agriculture, where the Union has very far-reaching competencies. There are other areas such as transportation, where we operate on the basis of what we call shared competence, meaning that both the European Union, but also its member states, and we have one of them represented here on the podium as well in Lucas from the Netherlands, both the European Union and its member states can enact laws, can take actions in the various areas under shared competence. We, from the side of the European Union, try to do so, supporting the member states in promoting the various policy objectives. In the area of transport, in the area of active mobility, the European Union has quite significant activities. It is trying to guide, it is financing, it is trying to support member states in working to improve our mobility systems. The starting point for that activity, I think, is the reality in Europe, where 75% of the population lives in cities, and cities, I think, globally contribute about 70% of the CO2 emissions. Cities, there are a lot of externalities that accrue in the urban city environment from transporting both people and goods, not only CO2 but air pollution, noise, congestion, the rest of it. So because of those reasons, the European Union finds it important and appropriate to try to really look at how we can change the paradigm, how we can take a fresh look at how we organize, how we build, organize, develop our cities, our transportation systems. In this regard, we have also found, in our experience, that building the infrastructure to support these policy objectives is attractive, both for the general public, but also for public authorities, because it doesn't fundamentally cost very much money compared to many of the alternatives to improving the infrastructure, and hence the European Union is also putting its money where its mouth is. So in 2014, 2020, in the previous long-term financing period, I think we put something to the tune of 2 billion euros to $2.5 billion into active mobility support. In the ongoing, what we call financial framework, the medium long-term budgetary planning period, we're putting 3.2 billion to cycling infrastructure alone. It's not nothing, but at the same time, we should be mindful of the fact that that is only on the European level, topping up the much more considerable resources that are allocated by the 27 different member states of the European Union, by the hundreds, if not thousands, of regions across the European Union, and thousands or tens of thousands of cities, local authorities across the Union. So that's just what we are doing on the level of the EU to raise awareness and also be present in some of the activities. In addition to financing, just very quickly, on the legislative front, we are enacting, if you like, kind of a framework conditions for this kind of work. We are putting European money through European regulations in place to develop trans-European, cross-European transportation infrastructure. In this process, we have also defined cities that act as hubs or nodes in the European transportation system, cities with more than 100,000 inhabitants, 431 in all. And all of these cities are expected to produce their own sustainable urban mobility plans. So this is the kind of framework, contextual awareness raising and support that we try to do. If I have another minute for the cycling declaration.
Very quickly, yeah.
Very quickly.
Yeah.
So the cycling declaration is a non-legislative initiative that we came up with a year ago by the European institutions. Whilst it's non-legislative, I think it is still the most far-reaching policy initiative at the European level to support cycling, which is, I think, rightly identified as one of the most healthy, cost-effective, accessible, inclusive transport modes. There's one aspect in our promotion of active mobility and cycling specifically that I would like to spend just 45 seconds on walking you through, which I think usually gets a little bit less exposure or traction in the narrative or captures the public imagination a little bit less. Most people can associate and think about the air quality, public health benefits of active mobility, cycling, etc. But congestion, I just previously referred to the externalities that transport creates. In Europe, we have put figures on congestion. Europe-wide, we estimate that congestion costs the European economy to the tune of 1% of GDP, and in the more central, more dense regions, Benelux, Belgium, Holland, Luxembourg, parts of northern Germany, the Ruhrgebiet, what we call the industrial heart of Germany, the region around Paris, northern Italy, this cost can go above 2% of GDP. Now the EU is a 20 trillion economy. You do the maths. If you manage to cut down on the cost of congestion or get rid of congestion, you are talking about potential efficiency savings quickly running to the tens, if not hundreds of billions. And where else on the policy spectrum do you have relatively low-hanging pots of tens of billions? Not in very many places.
Yeah, Christian, I couldn't agree more with all of that. Maybe we'll have time to come back to you in the questions and things later, but we've got several panelists to get through today. So I want to go to Lucas to hear the member state view of this. Lucas, talk to us about what the Dutch goals on active mobility are, how that relates to your co-panelists here from the more transnational and city perspective, and the active capacity building trainings that the Netherlands government is sponsoring, and how others can benefit from that.
Thanks very much, Jill, and wonderful to be here. So the Netherlands is one of the 27 member states, and of course, a very famous, a cycling country. 25% of all the trips that people make in the Netherlands are by bike, and if you zoom into specific cities, the share can go up to 50 or even 60%. And nowadays, maybe the most remarkable thing about cycling is that it's completely unremarkable. It's so normal that people don't think about it. And this has not come easy, of course. That has been sort of a long-term, consistent and in-depth policy since the 1970s since the 1970s. And there are three pillars that are, I think, a basis of this consistent policy. Sometimes we refer to it as hardware, software, and orgware, and hardware being the material, physical necessities to make cycling attractive and safe. Software being the behavioral elements, like changing the hearts and minds of people by marketing, communication, education, and orgware collaborating, working together, the governance elements. And there's a fourth pillar that the Netherlands government is also investing in, and that's the transfer of knowledge, of expertise and knowledge to other countries and cities around the world. And we do that, for instance, via the Dutch Cycling Embassy. Actually, Skadi Tierpak, the managing director, is sitting in the room, so maybe you can have a chat with her later on. But Dutch Cycling Embassy is hosting all kinds of delegations that come to the Netherlands, show them around, and also organizing workshops in countries around the world. And another element Jill already referred to is ACTIVE, which stands for the Alliance for Cycling and Walking Towards International Vitality and Empowerment. And there's a lot of stuff to say about ACTIVE, but maybe one element that is important to mention is the capacity building program. That is a very important ingredient, and the aim to have 10,000 experts on active mobility around the globe in 10 years' time. Kickstarted in 2023. Working together with a lot of partners also in the room, a very nice, interesting program. And last year alone, we had 12 sessions, 12 workshops, hosted capacity building trainings in various cities in Bangkok, Manila, Maputo, Addis, Lima, Bogota, and Santiago de Chile, amongst others. Very well attended, also a very diverse mix of people attending, like from students to policymakers to transport professionals. And it's not copy pasting knowledge, it's really making it according to the local societal, geographical and cultural conditions, and to have also the aim to have long-standing change in those cities. If you want to know more about it, please feel free to later on have a chat with me or my colleague Thijs, also in the room. And yeah, that's sort of the main elements, the four pillars of Dutch policy. And maybe good to say, in addition, on top of the euros that the EU are spending on cycling, the Netherlands alone spends 30 or 35 euros per capita per year on improving cycling conditions. So that's also a huge additional amount of money flowing in there.
Okay. Thanks very much, Lucas. I recently moved to the Netherlands myself for the first time, and it's the most fantastic cycling infrastructure I've ever had. So, and then they tell me, shh, don't say that, because there's still stuff we need to improve here. So, okay. Good. I'd now like to go to Felipe. I think I'll come back to you after, because you've got slides, and what you want to say is a nice segue into the second session. So, V, I'd like to go to you. V, Siva Krishnamurthy, the Deputy Commissioner of the Greater Chennai Corporation. Could you talk to us a bit about how you include active mobility in your policies at the city level, and what is or will be implemented in the city, and what the main challenges are that you see in promoting active mobility, and what you need to move forward?
Good afternoon, everyone. So thanks for inviting me for the session. And with the policy level, I'm in Chennai, the city which I'm come from. I'll just give a brief about it. So it's a city which has more than 10 million population, and the number of streets or roads is 36,000 roads. And we are the first city in the country to adopt non-motorized transport policy for urban local body. I mean, the city corporation in 2014, where I think most of the cities all across the world, started talking about this non-motorized transport corridors and all those things. And the main aim while adopting this non-motorized transport corridors was to make 40% of our streets cyclist friendly, and more than 60% pedestrian friendly. So this was our idea, and considering the number of roads and 40%, 60%, this was it's like a ticking bomb for us, because the city which I'm come from, it's known for its high dense population and its rapid urbanization and all those things. And having a big roads in the city itself is very challenging for us. And I think this non-motorized transport corridor policy, I think we able to achieve it at least 90% of what we have envisioned in 2014. So it's almost 11 years and we have touched it. And now I think we are rethinking on not double it up. I think we want to make 80% of our streets now cyclist friendly and 100% pedestrian friendly. So that is our aim, and we just started working on that direction. Apart from that, during these last 10, 11 years, during the last decade, what we did is We even introduced a public cycle program where the urban local body, the city corporation, we selected almost 60 to 65 spots within the city where it is conducive for the cyclists to have a home to work and work to home, all the travel and all those things. And we installed cycles there and all those things. But due to a lot of challenges in the field, for example, other constructions like metro rail is going on, and because of the carriage width and all those things, the local conditions, I think it was not that successful. So what we thought is, okay, we will move to something else. And we what we did is we first thought, okay, we'll let us classify the roads into two categories. Of all the 36,000 roads, let's fix certain roads as a bus route roads, where and the remaining roads as a other roads where no buses or big no heavy vehicles should not travel. So we thought, out of this 36,000 roads, I think, which comes to around 5,642 kilometers of roads, we selected only 420 kilometers of road only for the buses and the heavy vehicles to go. Remaining, I think it will remain as a road which and only the cyclist, bike, and residential cars can use, and all those things. So that has given us a good clarity on where to invest what, and what kind of resources we have to divert for what kind of infrastructure. So with that, I think considering this 420 kilometers of the first stretch we taken, I think we started pedestrianing it for I think we want to do it 100%. We have completed almost 60% of it. So I think remaining 40% is due, and we are working on it. I think with the support of the state government and central government, I think we are on the verge of starting it. I think we are expecting around 2028. I think the Chennai city now will become 100% personalized city. So that is our aim and agenda.
Fantastic.
And yeah.
Mhm.
So
Great. Yeah, bravo.
And the most important aspect is the parking. I think, as I said, the road width and other things are there. So I think the parking management is something which we are very much into it. I think we already have a lot of parking, private parking is there, and all those things. I think in DC also, I think the parking is a main issue. The last 2 days I found it. So I think what we did is, usually we select a concessionaire and we ask him to manage a parking facility and all those things. But it was very very mechanical, in the sense that it was like he collects parking charge. I mean, it was not that much meaningful engagement of a third party. So what we did is, we will encourage private investment in parking management of the city. So I think we have started now encouraging PPP projects in parking management of the city. I think it's working well, and we are just monetizing a land, and I think the private party comes in, he invests everything, and he has more responsibility than being a normal concessionaire with the government. So I think that started working well for us. And one peculiar thing with India, especially with my city, is the street vendors we have. So I think it's a developing country, and you have a lot of street vendors there. And end of the day, it's co-living. I think they should also live. It's because their livelihood is dependent on this. And for us also, I think we should have a pedestrian friendly and cyclist friendly city. So I think with the help of our central government, we have a street vendor policy for us. And in that policy, what we do is, we designate certain areas a vending zone and certain areas a non-vending zone. So these two zones will be based on the cyclist and the walkers track and all those things. So we segregate the land use there, so that the street vendors does not encroach upon the walkways, and walkers does not encroach their areas also. So it's vice versa. So that is something which we thought about, and it's under implementation, and we have been doing it.
Right. Well,
And
thanks.
also,
Well, maybe we can come back and hear more a bit later. But
Okay.
thank you for sharing what you're doing in your city with us. We want to go to Felipe now, and Felipe is wearing two hats here, I think, in this session today. So on the one hand, he's going to tell us a bit about what's been happening in Lima, and also from because a colleague who was supposed to be on the panel wasn't able to join today. So Felipe, the same questions to you. How has, let's say, Lima been including active mobility in their policies, and the main challenges there, and what's needed to move forward? And at the same time, with your hat on from the World Bank, what can the MDBs do, and specifically the World Bank? And I understand that there's a cost-benefit tool that's been developed in collaboration with ITDP, which can also help give some answers there.
That's right. Thank you, Jill. And I'm going to be using some slides. Yeah, I think everyone can see them. So contrary to the Netherlands or Dutch cities, we all probably work in cities or face the challenge on cities that has less than 1% mode share of cycling. So it's inexistent. It's not, on the eyes, of policymakers or planners of the designing. So that's the real challenge. How do you change institutions and change public officials' mindset to really think, and plan and design, for this mode. And the argument is very simple. In the global south, we have, mostly compact cities that around 30% of the trips are between 1 kilometer and 3-4 kilometers. Those are potential bicycle trips. If you take the interested but concerned category of Roger Geller's classifications, that will get you to a potential 20 to 30% modal share of cycling in most of the cities. And that means huge benefits for the whole society in terms of travel savings, savings, in transportation costs, air quality, public health, child development, happiness, you name it. So this is the argument. This is the really thing that you need to build. And it takes, let me develop on the storytell of Lima. It takes decades. It takes, for this specific case, couple decades from a Dutch specialist to help to build the first bike lanes, to Gerhard Menkoff. Then 10 years after, developing a DEF project, and developing, further a bicycle development plan. 10 years after, a work of the World Bank that we were working, with the Metro and the BRT to start developing all this, to bring this, not just the single bike lane project, that is most of how public officials see this, is to a full connected network of lowest stress, of really safe bicycle infrastructure. That's the way that that bring, the game changer here. And we develop those and we make sure, that all this plan, the long-term development plan, the cycling strategy, the road safety plan, all of that, included that vision. But that's just the first step. Then, of course, you need the funding. You need to influence policymakers. So this is the nice tool that is live that you can use. It's free. cyclingmax.worldbank.org, developed with the World Bank ITDP. You can very simple put some information of the city, of the project, and we'll get you really nice information to influence policymakers. All those benefits that I mentioned, some of them can be included here, but you see the economic rate of return, 80%. Of our Lima program, the whole integrated is over 100%. I haven't seen projects in my life of that economic rate of return. I mean, this is the serious, question. It's a economic, and it's a simple, question, to really invest on this. And then you get the funding. When you get all those, you get the funding or the financing. That's how Lima and the Republic of Peru and the municipality of Lima, got agreed, to develop this what we call multi-phase programmatic approach. The World Bank board approved on last October of the first phase of 150 million, but an envelope of over $500 million to invest in traffic management and sustainable transport. So we are intervening. We're going to be closing the gap, the whole investment gap in smart traffic lights in the city. Smart because they will prioritize. They will have sensors. They will have dedicated traffic lights for pedestrians and bicycles, and they will prioritize active mobility flows and safety. We will be developing the whole plan of bicycle network, the over 400 kilometers of bike lanes through this program. We will be doing the super blocks, the Barcelona super blocks, the London traffic neighborhoods. We did a contest, 19 districts participated. We're going to be financing the first 5. We're working with Salvador Rueda there to ensure, this is to a high standard. We're going to be financing the metropolitan bike share system, and we're going to be doing safe crossings. We identified, the hottest spots, and WRI help us here, to do capacity building workshop for the design of those. So that's the important step. We have made an important step. The loan will be signed in few days, but the real challenge comes afterwards. The implementation is the real challenge. Because we have done a lot of these interventions are at the conceptual design. So this is a really emblematic corridor and intersection in a very high income neighborhood in Lima. So we want to really change. This is, you don't see this kind of infrastructure in Lima yet. You don't see it. And to influence the public officials to accept these design standards, I mean, we did an active workshop, full week there, working on different, but it's still there, they are scared. They don't really feel, that they have the political, commitment to really advance this. So a lot of capacity building efforts, a lot of skill development to do really this major leap in design standards will be the key in the implementation. And I welcome, the Dutch government, the Dutch High Embassy, WRI, and others, and all my colleagues here, that have supported this to really continue this, because if we do it right here, probably we can replicate this in many other cities in the region. Thank you.
Okay, great. So not surprising, what they're scared of most is that political kind of acceptance of what they're trying to do. Did I understand that right? Yeah, okay. Good. Well, thank you for that, Felipe. We're going to switch chairs here now. Just when you thought that we had all male panelists, now we have all female panelists for part 2. So yes, let's applaud that. Excellent. So let me introduce our panelists for the second part of our session today. Okay. Okay, so we have Guli Sabahi, who is a senior advisor for climate finance at the NDC Partnership. And we have Claudia Adriazola Style, who is the Deputy Director of Global Urban Mobility at WRI, and our co-host for today. And we have Athena Ronquilla Ballesteros, I hope I pronounced that right, who's Managing Director at Climate Lead. And then we've got Robin. And sorry, I'm in the leader. Oh, okay. I was going to say you're welcome. I mean, the more the merrier. I mean, the only qualification for this panel is to be female, clearly. But no. Thanks. No worries. Thanks very much. Yeah, we want to continue our conversation and maybe focus a bit more on the financing aspects of active mobility, because projects don't just occur by themselves. They must be properly supported, financed, and we need that as much as anything. So let me go back to my questions here. I think my next question is for Claudia. And Claudia, could you maybe give us a short summary of the outcomes of a very interesting workshop that was held in December here? So it was an international financing workshop on active mobility organized here in Washington, D.C. And what do you think would be the next steps moving forward after that workshop, resulting from this unique collaboration of actors between urban mobility experts and financial experts?
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jill. All right. So back in December, we had a workshop supported by the Netherlands, by the government of the Netherlands, to talk about how do we move the markets to be more interested in investments for walking and cycling. Why are we doing this? Because if you hear our previous panelists, particularly from Lima and from Chennai, most of the people in the developing world still walk, cycle, and use mass transportation independently of the quality of those. Yeah? To me, that is a treasure when we are seeing how our world and how us are struggling because the climate is changing. And so if we can provide walking and cycling that is safe and dignifying to these people, then we will continue working with Europe, with the United States to decarbonize that transport. But the transport in our countries is essentially clean. We just need to improve it a little bit more. Second thought, the majority of the resources in the developing world unfortunately go to transportation for cars, for private vehicles, for motorcycles, and that needs to be changed. We need to work as steadily as the World Bank and really the leadership of Felipe Targa has done it in the case of Lima, where the conversations with the governments have been tough, but you have been able to move them to say, yeah, we cannot have a transport system that relies only in a private vehicle. We have to really open it up for several reasons. Congestion, as we have heard from Christian in Europe, equity, health, road safety, and so on and so forth. So now, to the workshop. We have a great conversation, and that great conversation was to get two communities together. One, a very passionate one of people that work in walking and cycling that accepts absolutely no as a response. And on the other side, financiers that understand how the markets work, how the flows of resources work, and how can we match these two communities. We had an amazing conversation where I think the financiers were very open to listen and to understand that there is, in fact, a very big need, and that in transport, we cannot solve all the problems. When you step out, particularly in a city in the developing world, you can sense that there are a lot of problems: congestions, emissions, traffic safety, inequity. All of that cannot be solved with a silver bullet of just electrifying transport. We really need to do more. And walking and cycling has always been sidelined as a very small player that, you know, people do it anyway. Why do you need to invest there? Yeah. So what we are going to be doing next is starting to explore three main areas. The first one is to ask, and I think Christian has explained it really nicely, how the European Union that has trillions of a budget is already investing a small portion in walking and cycling, but it has an earmark. So we want the same with the multilateral development banks to start reflecting if we can earmark a percentage, 2, 3, 5% of the infrastructure budgets that can go into walking and cycling. The second is to start thinking about how do we move a little bit more those markets that are stuck into the same patterns, right? Probably via a catalytic fund. And third, how do we start moving the private sector to be more interested in investing? What are these pieces that need to be clean, that need to be well organized so that they feel comfortable coming and investing? What Felipe Targa has said is that, you know, the return on investment is huge. We are making people healthier. We are making people to move easier and faster in the cities. I mean, there is no reason why not to do it. The only reason is because we are stuck in the status quo, and we need to start shifting that. And I think, you know, talking about money and talking about how we finance this can help us, you know, move a little bit further the agenda. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you, Claudia. Yeah, really good insights there. Guli, I'd like to ask you, so could you please explain the potential role that international finance coalitions can have, and also as discussed last December during the workshop. And what's needed to really effectively engage the private sector in that? And could a catalytic fund as a functioning financing mechanism be helpful in your view?
Thank you for that question. So I'll be speaking on behalf of NDC Partnership, which is a global coalition that's supporting 90 plus developing countries on enhancing and developing NDCs. And this is an important year because the new round of NDCs are due and many countries have been already working on those. A few have submitted. And I'll speak on the kind of responding to your questions kind of from the perspective of NDC Partnership, and members like WRI, World Bank, CPI, ICCCFLA team are all members of NDC Partnership. So from the investor's perspective, I think the important place to start in terms of sending that political message is NDC itself. And, where active mobility has to be part of integrated transportation sector priorities of the countries, because increasingly now investors, both businesses, institutional investors and others, will be consulting NDCs for those signals on investment opportunities, those sectoral pathways, and also policy levers and some of the financing strategies that the countries are planning to deploy to attract different parts of the finance community, right? So we need both commercial investors, and we need to figure out the best way to really use impact investors, philanthropy, and concessional capital providers, including the support that's provided by MDBs, which is very important to attract commercial capital at scale. So in our work with blended finance platforms, and very quickly, blended finance essentially refers to the strategic use of public capital money and also public sector money and philanthropic capital on concessional terms to mobilize private capital at commercial terms. So for blended finance platforms, when we invited them to the workshop, I think one of the key points was made that how they would be looking at this opportunity. Number one, they would like to see if it's a part of the NDC itself. Number two, that it's a part of active mobility, active travel as part of that integrated transportation and infrastructure plan. I think active mobility on its own may not be as attractive to blended finance platforms because they're ultimately to mobilize private capital, but they're saying that if active mobility is part of integrated infrastructure plan, then there's an opportunity for some joint infrastructure and joint services, and where there could be, risk allocation and discussions held and negotiations, where the concessional capital providers, some of the impact investors and philanthropies could come in more to, finance and support the active mobility segments of that plan, whereas e-mobility and other more commercial parts of the plan could be more attractive to the commercial investors through blended finance structures. Mm-hmm. So, I would stop here. Happy to answer more questions. Yeah. And I think the catalytic capital would be very important. Mm-hmm. Because there is very limited amount of it. And there are many parallel efforts. And I think kind of coming together and doing this systematically, whether as part of the country mobilization platforms or country platforms, or part of the regional investment strategy, for the countries and cities where that would make sense, would be most efficient way of using resources. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much for those insights. And I think, when I think of integrating active mobility into other really big projects, then I think of people like Francois in the audience here representing UIC for rail. And also Christian may know that part of our lobbying towards the European Commission also is making sure that active mobility projects are integrated into these really big Trans-European Transport Network corridor projects. Thanks too. Okay, Athena, I would like to hear the philanthropy's point of view here. So as you're joining us from Climate Lead today, and could you tell us how you think philanthropies can help and support in the transition to more active mobility friendly cities? And how can philanthropies help in identifying maybe the most effective financing mechanism and how to implement it once built?
Big questions.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. How are we feeling? Are we actively engaged? Are we awake? This is a hard time zone, for some of you who have traveled. But it's a very important topic, so I want to make sure we're still engaged. So I'm Athena. I work with Climate Lead, which is relatively new to climate philanthropy. We're actually just set up with Christiana Figueres' help 5 years ago, and our role is to activate and mobilize new donors to climate, and successfully have activated a few major families to invest in climate over the last 5 years, but it's not enough. The first thing I want to tell you, just full disclosure, is this issue is not in climate philanthropy's radar, which is also one of the findings that we had at the December workshop. It is on the paradigm and on the mindset of health funders, clean air funders, women and children's rights funders, development funders, but not yet in a major way as I would personally wish to on climate. So I think that is the number one homework. Having said that, it doesn't mean that we cannot forge funder collaboratives, as you have explained just now, between public and private sector, local and national and global stakeholders with philanthropists, and philanthropists who are acting globally, but also philanthropists who are just beginning to understand, who are based in many of the global South countries where this issue is of paramount importance. That's the second homework. I'm looking at you, Lucas, because I think some of us have to take these action points forward. So I have 4 things to suggest, and maybe this is unconventional for this sector, but these are not new ideas for the work that we've been doing on power sector transformation, for example, in some of the climate mitigation spaces. One, the first panel has emphasized this. You cannot build active mobility in sustainable infrastructure if you don't have political will. Well, political will comes from winning hearts and minds. And so I think one of the takeaways from the December workshop is actually building political will to affect changes in policy and the overall landscape of infrastructure finance requires massive demand from the countries themselves, and countries will have that demand if their constituencies and stakeholders build that demand. So there was a very loud call for making active mobility a default priority in global, local, and national infrastructure funding, and that will come from citizens and communities campaigning, from Warrior Moms to Our Kids for Climate, Dear Tomorrow. These are organizations that have historically pushed for policies at the local and national level and have become very successful because they're able to connect with politicians and decision makers' hearts and minds, irregardless of political parties, right? Because it's good for the health of their children, it's good for the planet. The second thing is the work around air quality resonate around with schools. Again, in the December workshop, we had a representative from the London City office who basically have said air quality monitoring in schools and taking the data, because we can't just stop from there, taking the data into transformational action, activated moms and kids and communities and neighborhoods in ways they've never seen before. And when you write to those politicians, they get activated. So the good news is all those campaigns probably cannot be funded by the World Bank, nor by the Dutch government, nor by the EU. But that's where philanthropy comes in. We're agile, we're flexible, we push the boundaries. We could make things happen in ways that governments and private sector cannot happen. And I think that's where the partnership comes in. So the second idea that I also borrowed from some of the folks at the workshop is to really spark innovation towards new solutions. You know, I'm sadly from a country that has suffered from really bad infrastructure planning. I live in Manila, where an 11-kilometer highway is. Someone been to Manila here? So, okay, the 11-kilometer highway from the airport, right, to the south to the north, it can take you 3 to 3.5 hours. It literally, every time I go home, if you take your car or even if you take the bus, and the MRT only takes you up to a certain extent. So I sit in my little humble apartment looking at EDSA, and I can show you pictures, and there is no time when there is no traffic, and really bad planning where you have the highway, and then you have the MRT on top, and then you have a pedestrian in between bridge, and then you have an elevator for the elderly built in between the system. It it needs massive overhaul. So I think we need innovation, and we need to work with local businesses, and we need to work with local families, because guess what? This is another thing I borrowed from the workshop. This is a new business opportunities for Asian families, for African families, for Latin American families. The next generation of philanthropists can make money out of active mobility, cycling, and biking infrastructure, as we have demonstrated in the US and Europe. But it's not happening. And I think that's where philanthropy can come in to sort of lay the groundwork. The last one is inspiring market making mechanisms and driving market forces to faster widespread adoption. And here I would emphasize the role of our community in gap filling design studies. Some of the design studies that Felipe presented, that would be awesome. But again, coming from my country, we don't have enough mobility experts. So think like you, who have been exposed to this kind of innovation and market design. So, and I think that's where the World Bank can come in, honestly, and some of the bilateral. We need to plant more people, like all these amazing people in this room, in those ministries, in transport ministries, in finance ministries, not in climate change and environment ministries, because they're already converted. Mainstream the thinking and sustainable infrastructure integrated planning across ministries. And then I have a last suggestion, and I have to say this because this is Claudia's favorite intervention from the workshop. I had this idea of maybe doing something similar on the catalytic finance, very similar to what we've done with the power sector transformation for Vietnam, Indonesia, and Philippines. And for those of you who have not heard this, you can contact me for more information. But we basically built a joint philanthropy, bilateral government, and multilateral infrastructure in the region to help the three countries transition to clean energy. And so we set up 3 different financing facilities that cater to the need of the country. So one is a civil society. Of course, you have to have a civil society arm, philanthropy that supports, political work, communications, movements, etc. And then we built, which is my favorite thing, called the Southeast Asia Energy Transition Partnership. So this is where some of our peer funders, the Children's Investment Fund, the Grantham Institute, Yajalara from Australia, we put in something like $16 to $32 million, which then unlocked $400 million of bilateral money coming from Denmark, Germany, the UK, USAID back in the day, and then 2 or 3 other governments. And that provides technical assistance to governments, to transport ministries, cities, and municipalities who want to do the kind of work that Chennai is doing. And that is specifically for them. But then the community complain. We're like, okay, you have something for civil society, you have something for government. What about us, private sector, businesses who are based in the region? So we set up what's called the Southeast Asia Clean Energy Facility, which is this catalytic finance, again, blended with philanthropy, which gives your first $500,000 for you to do your project and resource assessment for a cycling infrastructure. And that activated a new group of businesses and enterprises in the region. So it's not the perfect model, but it's something we could lean on in the future.
Okay, thank you so much. I want to invite all the panelists back up. I'll vacate my seat so there's enough seats for you so that we can have some audience questions. That's all right. I'm sure that some of you are burning to ask a question. We've got one right here. I think so, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you
what's
to all the panelists. Marcelo Blumenfeld, University of Birmingham. I couldn't agree more with all of you. So hopefully I can bring some, not provocation, but something for us to think that's just been consuming me. I totally agree with 2 of the speakers that said, in the global south, most of the trips are short trips. First part of the question is that a bottled demand that they just travel short distances because they cannot afford to travel longer distances? Considering that in the global south, cities are growing, is that the case that if they have a better socioeconomic opportunity, they will travel longer, distances will be longer in megacities? So then, considering that possibility, my question to the panel is, because cycling and active mobility is so important, what would be the case? Is that the case that is it integrating active mobility in longer distance public transport, or is it trying to talk to land use and making sure that mobility is only done by active modes? What is your opinion on that?
Claudia.
I start by Felipe. I think it's all the above. You know, there are definitely connections that need to be made with public transportation, and it's absolutely important because, you know, past 5 kilometers, people need to use mass transportation, but then the last mile connectivity is very important. Now, the cities in the developing world tend to be compacted. We don't have those suburbs with big houses outside, not yet. And so we have to continue keeping those compact urban development, you know, setups. But Felipe, you might
Yeah,
want to
I
add.
was just gonna mention that it's mostly urban form. It's compactness, you know, in housing and activities that make it closer. But then, you know, they don't really reach. Travel times are still super high, and it's super high because they don't have good public transport, the dedicated infrastructure, metro lines, BRTs. So that's part of the equation that needs to be solved in parallel. Otherwise, they will just choose, you know, not even cars, motorcycles, and that's what we have been seeing in a lot of places.
Okay. Got another
So-
question? Or oh, sorry, Christian.
Maybe just to add that this issue is not you have no monopoly rights to it in what you term the global south or in the developing world. This is very much an issue. Holland, Lucas's country, may be the outlier. The average distance traveled by a car in Europe is not above 5 kilometers either. So vast. Even if the public transport offer is in some places relatively attractive, we are confronted with the very same issues of first mile, last mile effective solutions to make that more attractive. And so it's a universal issue. We're all in it together.
Absolutely right. Oh, okay.
So my point may not answer you directly, but I just want to mention this thing. So I mean, the challenge which the city as a city government I face is it's not connecting the core city with the suburb or suburb with this existing streamlining my own projects which runs within the city with active mobility. The streamlining these two are making synergy between this existing infrastructure. Actually, no, it's a immediate need for my. So I think I just want to mention this point. Thank you.
Okay. Next question.
Well, my name is David Edmondson from Edmondson Planning and Design. Sorry, my question is, active mobility, especially in the developing world, tends to be, it's everywhere, including in rural areas. I know that the Dutch have a reasonable system for their stuff outside of cities. But how have your cities or governments approached the issue of that kind of travel in the small urban and rural locations, and what could be done to encourage elites that may want to drive around and think that's the best way to see that as a viable mode of transportation?
Okay. Anyone want to take that one? Lucas.
Hello. Yeah, that's of course a great question. Especially I can answer for the Netherlands, for the sake of the Netherlands. And still, the rural areas in the Netherlands are pretty densely populated. So in that sense, we don't really have rural areas in the Netherlands, to be honest. But we have built out an extensive network of bike lanes, even into the rural areas, and especially the rise of the pedelec, the electrically assisted bikes in the Netherlands. That's really sort of a game changer, especially for the rural areas, where it is made really more accessible also by bike to go to all kind of facilities around in the countryside. So that's a very important ingredient. At the same time, you see that the bus travel or the public transportation is declining a little bit in rural areas, but it's really being compensated for the uptake in the use of e-bikes. But of course, the Netherlands is then a weird exception. I think the question of rural areas and access, especially in developing countries, is much more important.
Anybody else want to add to that? Or should we go to the next question?
Hi, I'm Mario. Can you hear me? Hi, I'm Mario, and I'm a global citizen. I've lived in both Europe and North America, and I've traveled to Latin America, was just in Peru, and have been to India. When I was in Arequipa in Peru, I noticed there was a bike lane. There were streets that were closed to cars, but no one was using it. So one observation I made is that in those areas, the cars did not respect the zebra stripes or anything. They would just drive. So aside from the infrastructure, especially in countries where the drivers think they are the king of the roads, how do you make changes to make it more friendly and make sure that people feel safe to walk and bicycle?
May I? Thank you for bringing that example, because and let me use that example, because I think that's the real challenge. One thing is to do the map of the network, and then what design standards you bring to the specific right of way to those streets. And that's where, things can go really, really bad. And I think Peru did a regular work during the pandemic. I mean, the whole instrument was really good because it was national government transferring resources to do pop-up bike lanes. And in many countries, those were done well. In Peru, I think didn't go well. And Arequipa particularly was really poorly implemented and designed, to the point that right now we're preparing a program building of this experience in Lima, in intermediate cities, in Lima, in 6 cities. And the Arequipa mayor doesn't want to hear about bike lanes. So we are not including bike lanes in the program for that city because that. So that's the consequences of doing and implementing and using really poor design standards on this. If you are not going to do it right, don't do it. Don't do it, because you're going to screw up the whole policy and strategy.
Yeah, and I think Claudia has something to add to that as well. Oh, no? Okay, sorry.
Not exactly to that, because we are about to finish the session. I just wanted to ask who participated yesterday in the bike ride. If you can raise your hands. All right. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions to our moderator. How did you feel yesterday?
Well, the weather was fantastic and the group was great. It was my people, definitely, and going on a great bike ride. Fantastic. Yeah.
Fantastic. Laila, how did you feel? There you go. Anna. Yeah. So with that, I just wanted to say, it is super, super important that we work together to fix those issues, to feel fantastic. It really feels good to cycle. It really feels good to walk. It's so important for our bodies, for our minds. So just call for everyone that has come to this meeting to work hard to really move this agenda forward. That is a very tough agenda.
Yeah, thank you, Claudia. I think we've come to the end of the session, but please approach our panelists individually. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. Really great insights. Yeah, I think all of us would be happy to catch up with you individually as well. So thank you. Hi, how are you? Good to see you.
Yeah, good seeing you too. Yeah. I was hoping there would be another event where we could chat about Freiburg or something. But no, I'm glad to see you. Yeah. How's it going so far? Pretty good.